So over the weekend, this story was spreading everywhere. People are talking about the desecration of the ancient Canterbury Cathedral. This is actually a cathedral controlled by the Anglican Church, but it used to be a Catholic cathedral, and that's personally why I care about it. It's also the site of Thomas Becket's martyrdom, and it was founded by St. Augustine of Canterbury. It has a very long history. 1400 years ago is when this church was founded, and now what has happened to it is it's under the control of a bunch of woke gay people. And the Dean of Canterbury, David Monteith, approved this art installation called Hear Us to be displayed inside, where it's a bunch of what appears to be graffiti messages all over the walls and pillars inside. You can play this video and show some of them. Yeah. But this isn't actually even graffiti art. The ironic thing is, these are printed out stickers.
Stencils. Okay, they're stickers, yeah.
Stickers that were stuck on the wall, and you can even see if you look at the font that they used in all of these messages, they're just stock images. They weren't even spray painted onto the walls. And it's designed by an art curator named Jacqueline Cresswell, who actually only, like, as far as I did in my research, she only curates art installations in places of worship, like in Christian churches. And then there's also this poet named Alex Vellis, who looks extremely smarmy, and he was the one who came up with the wording, I'm guessing, for all of these messages. He's non-binary and queer and vegan and all that stuff, goes by they them pronouns.
I have to ask you then.
The works.
I have to ask you. Hashtag, if you made us all in your own form, why the violence, the killing storm?
Yeah, that's
Can you answer
incredibly poignant.
Checkmate, conservative.
Thank you. That was great time.
Got him.
You just pwned all Christians.
With facts and logic.
Thank you, guys. So that was kind of the point of the whole art installation, is we're going to put all these messages that are challenging God's authority inside a place of Christian worship and call it art. Some of them also question God's existence. One of the messages says, "Are you there?" Another one says, "Do you ever regret your creations?" To which I said, God doesn't regret his creations, but I hope that you will regret your creations one day.
We still live in this age. Look, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I was never an art major. I still laugh when I hear like the character in the TV show that's like an art history major. Like, what does that even mean? But was there ever a time where like lame, trendy nihilism wasn't the case for artists? Like, is there just some need for there to be some sort of like faux intellectual nihilism?
Well, it used to be that artists were not like worshipped in the culture.
Yeah, they were, if anything, it's like when they would talk about like artists of old, they were actually looked down upon.
I was actually inside the Sistine Chapel recently, and I was getting a tour from a seminarian in Rome who has a lot of knowledge about art history, and he was talking about the way that artists were commissioned for their work. Usually they had no creative control over what it was they were meant to depict. They were paid to create something very specific that was laid out for them, and there were very few exceptions to that rule. Michelangelo being one of the exceptions. He got to choose what was depicted in the Sistine Chapel because he was exceptional for his time, and he was an innovative artist. Most artists that were paid for their work, they did not decide what was going to be depicted inside a church because that was left up to the authority of the church. This is a complete upside down version of what art in sacred spaces used to be for. This is, in my opinion, blasphemous. Another message said, "Why did you create hate when love is by far more powerful?" That's, I think, very blatantly blasphemous to assert on the wall of an ancient church that God created hate. That is completely anti-biblical, completely... it is...
Do you want to explain that in better detail?
Completely false. The idea that God created evil or created hate or created sin is complete, or violence or any of the other things that are, being, kind of childishly complained about on these messages, that's not true. That's not theologically true.
Okay.
And that's why they were approved to be displayed in the church, because the point of this is transgression. Another message. Can you
explain how that, like, is the idea that God created man and like hate is a man-made construct? I don't know the answer to this.
The truth is that evil, sin, suffering, evil and sin are privations of the good that God created.
Okay.
That's not the doing of God. God permitted us to have the choice.
Free will.
Yes, okay. Like he gave man free will, and that doesn't mean that sin is God's will. It just means that he permitted us to choose to love him or not with our actions. Another message that was displayed here said, "Why are you indifferent to suffering?" This is a challenge directed at God, asserting that he is indifferent to suffering. I mean, anyone who can look at the crucifix, where God is literally suffering for the sake of humanity, cannot say that God is indifferent to suffering. That just defies reason. But let's talk about who is behind this, though.
There's a 20 before we get to that.
From Shane H. Wilder. I wrote an article over the desecration of the Canterbury Cathedral yesterday. I quoted Mary's tweet about Job. Last year, they had a rave there, and the Rochester Cathedral in Kent put mini golf in the nave. It's sickening. Yeah, that's true.
Wait, aren't these like, so who funds? It's funded through the church?
Yes.
Bro, they're running it like it's a for-profit business. That's even worse.
So
like, if you're not...
on the Canterbury Cathedral website, they have a page dedicated to the art installation. They say this is going to be up in the cathedral until January of 2026. A unique collaboration between poet Alex Vellis, curator Jacqueline Cresswell, and marginalized communities. Through graffiti-style displays within the cathedral, participants pose personal questions to God, merging contemporary inquiries with ancient architecture. The project highlights graffiti as a means of reclaiming public spaces, preserving cultural heritage, and affirming identity. By blending traditional and innovative elements, Hear Us explores the dynamic interaction between faith, art, and community, offering participants a platform for creative expression and self-discovery in a sacred setting. So I actually did look to Alex Vellis's Instagram, the poet behind this. He's currently clapping back at J.D. Vance and Elon Musk and other public figures who are pointing out what a disgusting, disrespectful transgression this is against a place of worship, and saying, they're twats, and, let's see them stand up for marginalized communities. Like, these are not Christian artists, obviously. That doesn't even need to be said. Here were some of the comments that were on the page. This art installation focuses on partnering with marginalized communities such as Punjabi, Black, and Brown diaspora, neurodivergent, and LGBTQIA+ groups. The Reverend David Monteith, Dean of Canterbury, also said, "There is a rawness which is magnified by the graffiti style, which is disruptive. It is unfiltered and not sanitized. This exhibition intentionally builds bridges between cultures, styles, and genres, and allows us to receive the gifts of younger people who have much to say," which is ironic given that young devout Christians these days completely oppose things like this. They want traditionalism, hence the revival of traditional Latin Mass communities, largely driven by Gen Z and millennial Christians. They don't want desecration of sacred spaces. This is intended to appeal to the most out-of-touch boomers. Jacqueline Cresswell being one of them, the Dean of Canterbury being another.
Guilty for some reason of their own religion? Like, why are they so hell-bent on doing this? I
mean, I think the Dean of Canterbury, given the fact that he is an openly gay man, is an infiltrator of the church. I don't think that he genuinely holds Christian beliefs. This is an intentional uprooting of Christian culture. He also added that this graffiti installation makes him wonder, quote, "why I am not always able to be as candid, not least in my prayers." So this is him basically admitting that all of these messages are meant to challenge God's authority inside a Christian church. I posted a video about this on Instagram and TikTok over the weekend and showed a picture of the Dean of Canterbury. Physiognomy never lies. This man is just as ugly on the outside as he is on the inside. And I also saw a piece in European Conservative by Kajetan Skowronski, who petitioned against the silent rave that was held in the Canterbury Cathedral.
Wait,
back
is it one
in
of those
February.
ones where they wear headphones while
Yeah.
they're doing it? Yeah.
They put up a petition.
I mean, that's my
against
problem with
it.
it. If you're gonna have a rave, at least have a real rave.
They got over 1,000 signatures and presented it to the Dean of Canterbury, and he met with the Dean of Canterbury about this, where he defended the decision to hold this silent rave with Eminem songs and Britney Spears songs inside the cathedral with an open bar. He summarizes his main points, and he says it's important for understanding how a sacred minister can talk himself into inviting sacrilege into God's house. On the one hand, the dean was keen to stress the financial needs of the cathedral, that this was a good fundraiser towards the £10 million he must raise each year to maintain it. He was clear that he had not naively thought that it would lead to any religious conversions for the ravers, but he would not go so far as to describe it as a necessary evil or an act of profanity that was regrettable. He required to pay for that which is sacred. He maintained that in his understanding of the theology of the incarnation, Christ had come into the mess of the world, and so too the church must enter into this mess. But what he failed to understand is that, yeah, Christ entered into the mess of the world, not to affirm the mess, but to redeem the mess. And that's
Well, you're not even allowed to
not expressed
You're
at
not
all.
even allowed to ask anybody to repent anymore.
Right. Obviously,
it's
that-
socially unacceptable.
Right. The dean defined the nave of the church as both a sacred space and common ground where it was fitting to engage in both sacred and secular activities. The more exclusively sacred side chapels and altars are sites of martyrdom. A few steps from the nave would not be open to ravers, he insisted. The dean made an interesting argument based on historical precedent. In medieval times, he noted, the nave had been used for purposes other than worship, such as markets for pilgrims and church ales, festivals particular to England at which local beer was drunk. However, that seemed to stretch the comparison very far. Whilst church ales may have taken place in some naves, typically in poorer parishes which did not have separate halls, church ales were usually organized by parish guilds to celebrate a patron saint and raise funds for a good cause. Hence, festivals were infused with the sacred life of the church in such a way that cannot be said of a disco, which simply uses the sacred building as a quirky venue. And I did point out they just basically made the interior of the church look like the graffitied walls of a bathroom stall at any music venue that you go to. Mm-hmm. It's just, I mean, this person is an infiltrator, in my opinion. I don't think the Dean of Canterbury genuinely holds any of his purported theological beliefs. And I do feel a little bit of vindication as a Catholic that this is an Anglican-controlled parish.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.